Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Tom Richards. I'm the Assistant Chief Constable of the Kent and Essex Serious Crime Directorate. As you know, my officers are investigating the murder of PCSO Julia James. If I could just start off by once again expressing my huge regret and sympathy for the event. My thoughts and feelings go out to the family and her colleagues. This is an awful, tragic incident that we are investigating. Julia was murdered on the edge of Ackholt Wood 8 days ago on Tuesday of last week, and we've been investigating relentlessly since then. Today we have released a photograph of Julia wearing the clothes that she was wearing when she was murdered. You'll see some dark-coloured Wellington-style boots, some blue jeans and a light-coloured blue waterproof coat with a hood. You'll also see her dog, Toby, who was with her at the time she was murdered. I'm hoping that these images will spark a memory in someone, will help someone recall what they saw that could be of assistance to the investigation. I would like to thank particularly the local residents of Snowdown and Aylsham. They've been massively supportive and patient with the investigation. They've provided over 700 pieces of information to the investigation team. That is so important. It's helping us to piece together everything that happened at that time. I would again appeal for anybody who has any information, any recollection, anybody who was in that location on Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday last week in the area of the woods and fields to the south of Aylsham. Thank you.
Simon Jones from BBC. The dog stayed with Julia. Have you managed to gain any evidence from DNA from the dog at all?
We've got a very considerable forensic strategy, as you would expect. It does include the dog. That is being staged through the laboratories. I'm not in a position, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to give a running commentary on the many exhibits and the forensic strategy that we have underway, but of course we've considered all opportunities around Toby.
Have you managed to actually ascertain the time you think she was killed? Because there is quite a time frame. What do you know the time frame yet from when she left home to when she was killed?
We were called shortly after 4 p.m. On Tuesday of last week, 8 minutes past 4, by members of the public who came across her. We are, of course, now working backwards from that time, looking at every opportunity, communications, data, many reports, as I said, over 700 pieces of separate information from members of the public to help us narrow that down. But of course, it's not going to be possible or appropriate for me to give you a precise time, if that ever is possible, of course.
Mr. Richards, Shepherd Party, Man Online. You mentioned that you were looking for people to come forward Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. Why is that? Why the Monday before?
Well, of course, we're particularly interested in Tuesday itself. But as you know, I'm keeping an open mind. I do not know the motive of this attack. I do not know if it's somebody she knew. I do not know if it's a stranger attack. Of course, that possibility is particularly frightening to local residents. I don't know, therefore, if it's someone who's regularly in the area, therefore increasing it to a 3-day period. But we're genuinely interested in any information. If anybody has got any concerns, any suspicions, we really want to hear about it. We'll be calling house to house in Aylsham. That process has already started. It's really important that we give people an opportunity to provide any information and, of course, raise any concerns with us.
Yeah, well, there's been some reports that she may have been followed the day before on the Monday. Have you any clues on any sort of realistic line on that at all?
As I said before, I'm not going to give a running commentary on every piece of information. We are really grateful to the public. They've given us some incredibly helpful information. We are triaging that. We're prioritising where appropriate. We have many priority lines of inquiry, but I'm not going to speak about individual pieces of information.
Kit Bradshaw from ITV News. When you spoke to us last Friday, you said you had no suspect, no clear motive. Do you feel now that you are significantly closer to catching Julia's killer?
Every day that passes, the investigation progresses. We genuinely have many lines of inquiry, many priority actions, but it would be inappropriate for me to try and guess at a motive. I'm keeping my options completely open. I'm going to allow the investigation team to become blinkered in any way. We need to consider every option, and we continue to do that.
And is it still the case that you have no suspects and no clear motive items?
Nobody has been arrested at this stage, and you're absolutely right. We do not know with any certainty what the motive of this attack is. There are clearly a number of possibilities.
And earlier today we saw quite a big search operation in Women's Walls, about a mile and a half from the crime scene. Can you shed any light on what your officers are looking for quite away from the crime scene itself?
Well, we're searching a number of locations. As you're clearly aware, we're trying to establish the route that the offender approached the location where Julia was murdered, and of course the route, if different, that the offender left that location. So we're considering a wide range of locations in the hope that it gives us that crucial piece of evidence.
If you have no clear motive and no suspect, where does the investigation go from here?
I'm fortunately in possession of an absolutely fantastic specialist murder investigation team. They're within the Serious Crime Directorate. This is what they do for a living. It's a hugely challenging investigation. Of course, in many such investigations, we have a suspect right from the outset or very early on. It's what makes it so challenging, but it's why we've dedicated our most experienced investigators. It's why we're keeping that open mind and we're looking at every single possibility. But of course, it's why I'm appealing today for as much assistance from the public as possible. I think the public are one of our most important assets in this investigation, and they've been absolutely fantastic in their support, but I do need that to continue, and I'm hoping the picture that we've released today might just spark a memory in someone.
Sam Lennon from the Dover Mercury. What is it you would need from the public above all? For example, piecing together the final steps of our last movements and our last hour or so, sight of anybody acting suspiciously in the area. What would be the most important piece of information you could have right now?
I mean, of course, what is particularly helpful to us is anybody who actually saw Julia herself or saw anybody in the area to the south of Elsham that I've described. That's actually crucial for us. We're trying to establish who was in the area at the time so that we can speak to them and help to piece together exactly what happened.
So do you have any idea of how the killer arrived or left? Was there a vehicle? Did you report to a vehicle there at all?
This is a very remote location, so I think people did not approach this scene in a conventional vehicle, most likely on foot. It's a popular dog walking area, but of course other vehicles, agricultural vehicles, off-road vehicles, bikes would be capable of reaching that area. Again, we're considering every option, and of course we're studying the area very carefully. But we've got to be careful that we keep that open mind because it's popular. It's a leisure area. Evidence of, for example, a bike or someone walking through the area isn't necessarily linked to the offence.
Have you had some information that there might be an off-road vehicle or a bike suspiciously in the area?
As I said, we've been blessed with a huge amount of information for the public, but I'm not going to provide a commentary on every single piece of information.
Do you have any, I know the things you can't say too much about, but do you have an abundance of forensic information perhaps to keep you moving?
Forensic evidence is actually absolutely key to every such investigation. So yeah, we've got a large team of dedicated forensic specialists and experts who are examining the scene. As you've seen, we're doing a fingertip search of the scene. That is going to take a long time. I'm going to need the continued support of the local community. We are likely to be in that area for a number of weeks, but it's absolutely crucial that we exploit every single forensic opportunity from that scene, and we'll do that in a staged way, and of course hope that will bring us a breakthrough.
Andy Robinson for a press agency. There's been reports in the weeks and days before and after of multiple offences such as dog napping in Nonnington, exposure in Nonnington, and more recently a man approaching children asking for pictures. Are these reports forming part of your investigation?
We're considering all information, so you're absolutely right. Many members of the public have provided information. We're scouring all of that information to see whether we think it's relevant, to see whether we think it informs the investigation. The level of motivation and interest from the public to provide information, of course, presents us with challenges. It's a huge amount of data, but I'd much rather that than the alternative, and it's really helping us piece together the activity in the area while we try to work out what is relevant and what is not.
Local people will still notice a big police presence. You say you have a lot of officers down there. 8 days on now, can you give a sense of how many of those officers are public reassurance? We've seen lots of foot patrols in the area. And how many are part of your team who are actively involved in the investigation?
More officers at the scene are there as part of the investigation, but of course, as you rightly say, reassuring the public is hugely important. Of course, this is a really concerning incident. But yeah, we have a wide range of officers. We have officers preserving the integrity of the crime scenes, which are very large. We have specialist search officers, specialist forensic officers, investigators, and then, of course, officers reassuring the public. And as I mentioned before, we're going house to house in Aylsham and Snowdown, giving the public an opportunity to speak with us, share information with us, and also share their concerns, of course.
And the DCC said last week, I think, that there were hundreds of officers on the investigation. Is that still the case?
Yes, it most certainly is. It's a huge priority to the organisation.
And so, what forensic will tell you about the kind of instrument or weapon that was used?
That's not something that I'm prepared to divulge at this stage, but it is fair to say that Julia died from very significant injuries to her head, and of course that forms a significant part of our forensic strategy and investigation.
Do you know what the instrument was, even though you're not going to tell us?
I'm not going to comment.
Thanks.
Are you still looking for the weapon?
Again, it's not appropriate for me to get into detail. It's really important if we bring someone to justice that a jury hears this evidence as cleanly as possible. So I'm not going to be drawn on specifics of the case.
Can you tell us how Julia James' family are coping?
An incredibly difficult time for the family, of course. They're being incredibly supportive of us. They're being very brave, very courageous, but of course it's having taking a huge toll on the family, and we're ensuring that they get all the possible support from a range of experts, including specially trained officers, to support vulnerable victims.
Can you say how many times, would you be able to tell us how many times she was struck?
I'm not prepared to divulge that level of detail, but of course it's a consideration for the investigation.
Was she able to put up any defence in terms of forensic
You're all straying, understandably, into a level of detail that wouldn't be appropriate for me to divulge. Of course, that's part of our investigation and our forensic strategy and our examination of Julia, but it's not something I'm prepared to talk about.
How have the National Crime Agency assisted the investigation?
The National Crime Agency, among other things, help coordinate experts and specialist technical advice. That's completely usual. We use NCA experts on probably every homicide investigation that we conduct. They've been massively helpful on this occasion with a wide range of specialists, and of course they have assisted us, as other organisations have, with some search resources as well, because it's such a large area to search.
Thank you.
How confident are you of catching the killer?
I am confident that we're going to put absolutely every effort into it. We're meeting with the family, we're giving them those reassurances. This is the number one priority for Kent Police at the moment. This type of attack is incredibly rare. We're not linking it to any other offences, which makes it a particularly difficult investigation. But we've got the very best staff working and every resource necessary dedicated to this inquiry.
And one other question. Do you think this person was killed before?
I'm afraid that's impossible for me to answer, as I haven't identified a suspect, and I'm keeping every possible motivation open to me. I can't rule it out, but until we identify a suspect, that would just be guesswork, I'm afraid.
Could you possibly say now that you can rule out at least two motives, and that is robbery, because nothing was stolen, dog napping because the dog was left behind and unharmed?
Once again, I'm going to keep my options completely open until we've fully pieced together what happened. It is absolutely fair to say that her dog Toby was at the scene when members of the public arrived and subsequently when the police arrived, but because we weren't there, we don't know exactly what happened.
Any other questions?
Coming back to, obviously there's 2 railway stations there, in terms of obviously travelling public, have you appealed to them or have you approached it? Are you looking at any that possibly they use the train?
Yeah, well, of course we're considering every option because we don't have a suspect identified. We don't know whether they live locally, whether they've travelled to the area. We're considering absolutely every option. Of course, being a rural location, it's challenging. There's less CCTV, for example. But yes, of course, public transport is a standard line of inquiry.
And obviously, given the complexity of the investigation, do you think this killer's quite forensically aware?
Again, I'm not going to be drawn on the detail of the forensic strategy. The outcome of that forensic investigation may reveal something along those lines, but not necessarily.
Are you working with British Transport Police to pick up CCTV from either Elsham or Snowdown stations or the trains? To see if you can trace, to find out whether or not the murderer did come by train.
We have a major closed-circuit television strategy that is exploiting every such opportunity in the area, including that one.
In terms of CCTV and dash cam footage, are you prepared to say how much you've recovered or how much the public have given you?
I believe that we'll be in the hundreds of items seized by the end of this strategy. I haven't had an update today as to exactly what point we're at the moment.
And obviously, in terms of the stops yesterday, did that reveal any new
information? That was really useful for us. We conducted it on the 1 week anniversary of Julia's murder. We stopped 189 vehicles. The public were hugely supportive, provided a lot of information to the investigation. And again, I appeal for that approach and attitude from local residents and residents further afield to continue. We really need every possible piece of information to help us piece together exactly what happened to Julia.
Will you do an...
Sorry, so one thing then, you said that from 4 p.m. she was discovered. What time did she leave home?
Again, that's something we're looking at the moment through a number of means.
You must have told you what time she took the dog for a walk.
Julie was at home by herself at the time she took the dog. She took the dog for a walk.
And that would have been presumably half an hour before or something?
Again, I'm not going to be drawn on that level of specifics at this time.
In terms of, you said Julia was at home, do you think she was actually murdered in that location where she was found?
Again, it's a very relevant question, so a consideration always. That's why we get expert advice and we spend so much time examining the crime scene. I'm not at liberty to reveal what our conclusions are at this stage.
One more question then, if anyone's got one, or we'll wrap up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.